Chapter 9. Eternal Loyalty. Ren led me through the darkness in near silence. I tried to focus on Ren's chi and practice honing my senses as we ran across the countryside at high speed. Although I was able to follow her, I didn't feel like I had really gotten much practice. Still, I kept at it the entire way, knowing that it could prove an invaluable tool against someone like Liu. It took us about 10 minutes to reach Ordos from the palace. When we broke free of the forest, we followed the road before crossing a wide desert, and from there we stumbled into the huge city of Ordos. I noticed as we crossed the desert, we finally breached the cover of the hanging clouds, and the full moon was shining its light down upon the land. There were a handful of buildings that were 3 stories or higher, but the city's size was relative to the large amount of ground it covered. From our approach from the north, we could see a large plateau with elegant palaces resting atop it. I guessed that we might find the Ming Song family there, so that's where we headed first. We scaled the plateau in a single bound with ease, and after asking around a market, we were able to get directions to the Ming Song estate. It was a large palace with a huge plot of land and soldiers all over the place, each in that same matching blue armor we'd seen before. We came upon them from the backside and found little but a small family graveyard beside a single decrepit tree. The tree was pale gray and its branches were completely free of leaves, reaching for the sky like hands grasping up at the moon, trying to take its light for their own. But I noticed there weren't leaves on the ground here. Since the lack of leaves called my attention to it, I noticed what appeared to be the image of an old woman's face scarred into the ground. It stretched between the closest grave and the tree, and she had her eyes closed. The base of the tree seemed to be part of the odd pattern. I knelt down to get a closer look, but immediately stood up with surprise when the mouth opened slightly, and I heard a quiet wheezing gasp. Ren squeaked with fright, and I asked, "What the hell?" But the being didn't react. "Hey, can you hear me?" I asked. It still didn't respond. "I don't know what the heck that thing is, but it gives me the creeps. Let's get out of here, now," Ren begged, tugging at my arm. I kinda wanted to go too, but I wanted to give it one more chance and asked, "Are you related to the Ming Song family?" And we were both taken aback when the face's eyes opened wide. I stared into her empty eyes for what felt like an eternity before repeating my question. She still didn't reply. Instead, she simply closed her eyes and seemingly returned to her slumber. I tried getting her attention by stepping, stomping, and jumping on her, and I even dug my knife into her, but she still didn't react. Eventually, I gave up, and Ren and I returned to scouting out the Ming Song family estate. There was a particularly large group of soldiers gathered in the courtyard, a quiet unease among them as they cautiously chattered with each other. We walked by the front, and Ren pulled me aside after we examined the entrance up close. "Damon, I can sense my dad inside," she said, pointing toward the palace. I figured he would be. "Who's that?" I asked, looking toward a high balcony. Ren looked up too and saw the old man I pointed out. He was shorter than Ren's waist and had a long white mustache, bushy eyebrows, and a bald head, but he had an intensely pleased look in his blue eyes. He was wearing an eloquent lord's red robe with a metal mantle on the shoulders that had spikes that pointed up on each end. Ren didn't have time to respond before he started speaking. "Men, my children have returned from their mission, and with it they have effectively ended death across the land," he said as Liu and Lin Yu stepped out from behind him and stood at his side. The men responded with a resounding cheer for their success. I immediately noticed that Liu had bandage wrappings over his right eye, but Lin Yu looked no worse for wear. I was surprised to see a group of soldiers in a specially decorated armor take the front, standing before the men gathered in the grounds. The old man continued by saying, "And now, those among you so loyal as to give your lives for us, I ask you, sever your head from your body and serve us eternally in undeath." Everyone seemed quite taken aback, all except the decorated soldiers and the Ming Songs themselves. The decorated soldiers drew their swords and knelt down before their army, each leaning their neck into their blade until they removed their own heads. Their bodies flopped to the ground with graceless thuds as a few of the soldiers cried out in terror. Ren covered her mouth, looking like she was fighting back the urge to be sick. Just as a few started breaking ranks and fleeing for their lives, there was a collective gasp as the bodies of the beheaded started pushing themselves back to their feet, heads left on the ground like discarded pistachio shells. The bodies stood upright and held their weapons aloft. The men were still quite unsure and murmuring rose from them, but it was broken by the enthralled call of the elder Ming Song. "At last! We really have ridden the land of death. Now, men, take the upgraded weaponry we've provided you and prepare for battle against General Wong. His men pose an immediate danger to our lands, and we cannot allow this threat to go unchecked. But now you may march into battle without the fear of death." The men started chanting, "Live forever, General Lai," repeatedly. But something about all this didn't seem right. Something about that name felt familiar. My train of thought was interrupted by General Ming Song addressing his men once the chanting died down. "And now, my son has been blessed with an eye that can see the truth. Remove your bandages, Li Yu, and tell us all what you see," the general bid. As his father commanded, Li Yu unwrapped his eye and opened it, revealing the glowing pupil beneath. There wasn't a doubt in my mind that the eye had once belonged to Zhao. I immediately recognized the bright yellow iris and the pupil that shined like starlight, just the same as Zhao's eyes. Li Yu looked over the crowd for only a moment before he seemed greatly pained. He clutched at his eyes with both hands and started howling in agony. The old general gestured to his soldiers up on the balcony and quietly asked them to remove him. Lin Yu looked white as a ghost, and the soldiers seemed as though they were quite distressed by Li Yu's reaction. After clearing his throat, he said, "Clearly something has gone wrong with Li Yu's surgery. Please don't worry about him. Just as with all of you, he can't die anymore either. I assure you, he will be cared for with the highest of hospitality. For now, set your minds to the upcoming battle with General Wang. Dismissed." There it was again. But this time I remembered. General Wang, the leader of that ragtag group that took over the town I freed. "General Wang is dead and has been for at least a few days. Surely someone with as much influence as you already knows that," I called up to the balcony. General Lai was taken aback, and Lin Yu pointed her finger at me with fury in her eyes. "Damon, what are you doing?" Ren asked with shock. "Who the hell are you?" the old man asked. "This whelp has been trying to interfere in your plans for some time now, father," Lin Yu informed. "Oh, really? Then why haven't you dealt with him yet?" Lai demanded. Lin Yu flinched from him before responding. "Last I saw him, Li Yu had driven his glaive through his heart," in a somewhat alarmed tone. The old general growled and snapped his fingers rudely. "Think, Lin Yu. You removed death from the world. Of course he didn't die from being stabbed through the heart," he said, tapping himself in the temple. She looked like it struck her like a pallet of bricks. "Now go down there and capture him," he insisted. Lin Yu was surprised to be ordered as such, but immediately leapt over the balcony, falling 4 stories before landing in a cloud of dust on the ground. "Ren, go try and help your dad," I said. She was taken aback, but almost immediately nodded and took off behind me, letting me hold off Lin Yu from the front so she could approach from another angle. I had expected Lin Yu to lunge at me, but I was surprised to see her merely standing there when the dust settled, her purple eyes staring up at the sky. I looked up too and immediately noticed that the large cloud cover that had been over the forest and the surrounding area was either now expanding or moving to cover this area as well. It was only a matter of moments before the moon was overcast and its light faded from the battlefield, leaving only Lin Yu's shining light as the primary source of illumination. "What are you waiting for, Lin Yu? Get him!" General Lai commanded. Lin Yu stood silent a moment, now looking off to the north, where Ren and I had come from. "I'm giving you an order," he insisted. "There's something coming," she replied. I was shocked to say the least. Following her line of sight down the street, I was barely able to see the edge of the plateau from the torches of passers-by. And there on the edge of the risen ground, I saw them. A pair of stone horns that twisted at the end, attached to a stone mask with burning yellow eyes underneath, climbed the plateau before standing tall at its edge. "Towdy, what are you doing here?" I asked myself, not sure what to make of the situation. The beast didn't acknowledge me, moving down the street like a shadow as it vanished and reappeared closer and closer. It was moving toward the palace, but I was stuck in place, not sure what to do. Now the soldiers were really fleeing, scattering like insects after their log was moved. But the headless one stayed in place, seemingly entirely unaware of the danger lurking toward them. As Towdy arrived on the scene, General Lai retreated back into the safety of his palace. Lin Yu pointed her blade at the approaching monster before commanding, "Back down, creature! You have no business here!" She took up an aggressive stance, but Towdy slammed her aside with its horns before descending upon the beheaded soldiers, biting into them and eating their gray souls burning inside them. Lin Yu roared with dominance as she ran back and drove her blade directly into the beast's body, but it didn't seem to have any effect. I decided to try and help the soldiers, unsure if they could be saved. I felt power bubbling up inside as I dashed in and took a violent slash at Towdy, but my blade passed right through, like I was attacking nothing at all. With a simple shift of its body, Towdy managed to turn and kick Lin Yu and I both, sending us flying into the fence. We landed in a heap together and I immediately got back to my feet. electrifying my blade in a desperate attempt to damage the monster. Before I started charging him, Lin Yu grabbed my shoulder and pushed herself past me, saying, "Get out of my way!" before lunging at him full force. Towdy didn't even seem fazed by her attack, so I leapt at him too. I gasped with surprise when Towdy was shocked by the electricity around my sword, and it seemed to allow me to slash him as well. I couldn't help but smile to myself, but it was wiped right off my face when Towdy turned to face me with rage in his yellow eyes. He charged at me, so I slashed with as much force as I could muster, but his stone mask seemed to fend off the cutting edge of my blade. I held fast as he started pushing me through the dirt, but I was surprised when Lin Yu joined my side, slashing Towdy to apply pressure with her blade and keep him from forcing me back. "You hurt him just now. If I hold him off, can you keep damaging him?" she demanded. "Yeah, I think I can," I replied, straining myself to fend him off. I was shocked to find I didn't feel the pressure of the beast pushing me anymore, as Lin Yu planted her feet and put a hand on my shoulder. "Then go," she said, starting to push me. But it seems Towdy had been listening to us, because before her hand left my shoulder, the beast gave a low, whinnying roar, causing its eyes to flash pink, and my senses to start failing me all at once. I collapsed to the ground as darkness overcame me, taking all of reality along with it. I had expected to suffer through my worst memories as I had before, but instead, this time I saw something incredibly different. I still saw memories, but they didn't belong to me. I was baffled to find myself walking through Lin Yu's memories, experiencing them as if I were her, flashing through her trauma like I was walking through a dream. It started young, when she was no more than 4. She was torn from her mother and forced to undergo training as a blade of Ming Song, a position held solely by the women of the Ming Song lineage. Her teachers taught her an incredibly violent style of swordplay and did not hold back on physical discipline, sometimes beating the poor girl within an inch of her life. Whenever she behaved poorly, Lin Yu was beaten with whips or flails, and she quickly learned not to disobey her family. When she was 8, she was forced to be branded with a symbol of eternal loyalty to her family. The mark was literally burned into the center of her back by a hot branding iron, marking her as a warrior of her family name. Although I couldn't read Chinese, she could, so I was able to learn its meaning through her own understanding of it. The marking was of her family crest and read, "Achieve power, achieve immortality." Liu and Lin Yu had once had another older sister, Lei Jing. Lin Yu had looked up to her all her life, but she had to watch her die when she was 12 years old at the hands of Sun Wukong. She had been leading an attack on Sun's family, and they managed to kill his wife and son. So, in retaliation, he killed Lei Jing, using her death to send a message of warning to the Ming Song family. Lei Jing's death seemed to have taken hold of General Lai's mind, and he grew obsessed with their family motto, desperate to keep the others in their family alive. Eventually, he plotted the scheme they had underway to end death once and for all, putting it under the banner of his twisted idea of the greater good to build support. Lin Yu's mother, Mei, had also been a blade of Ming Song, and she'd often advised her, "The only thing that matters is tradition. Follow our creed," and that stuck with Lin Yu. The death of Lei Jing had also been very hard on Lin Yu's mother, and she died of grief a year or 2 later, having never recovered from her depressive state. General Lai was driven further into his plans to end death and made Lin Yu swear an oath of revenge. As training to become strong enough to defeat Sun Wukong, she walked the warpath her father laid out. She slaughtered thousands on the battlefield before eventually meeting an army protected by a great white dragon named Bai Long. She slew it with little effort, and through her perspective, I knew this meant she was going to gain immortality through this action. I was just about to see how when I bumped right into her. Lin Yu seemed just as surprised as I was that we bumped into each other, but as soon as she saw me, she looked somewhat sad. Her expression sunk until she looked grim, or perhaps even pitiable. I could tell from the look in her eyes that she'd seen my past, just as I'd seen hers. "I'm sorry for looking through your memories. You've lived just as hard a life as I have," Lin Yu said. "I don't think it's either of our faults, but it's nice to know that we have more in common than I thought. I suppose this is true, but I still can't allow you to end my father's plan," she replied. "But you saw my memories. So you saw that this undeath isn't what Lai thinks it is. These people losing their lives right now aren't going to stay like normal people for long," I asserted. "Maybe. But even if that is true, I cannot break the oath I've taken," she said sadly. "Why not? Your father's lying to you, and I can tell that you know it." "These people aren't going to survive this, Lin Yu," I said, starting to get frustrated. She crossed her arms and gave me a sour look. "Why do you even care? It's not like you know any of these people," she said. "So what? Why do I have to know them to not want them to die?" I asked, clenching my fists. Lin Yu looked surprised at my words, as if they had struck a chord within her. We had been walking toward each other down hallways of each other's memories, so Lin Yu turned back and stared down the hallway she'd been walking through for a few moments. Without turning back, she asked me, "Tell me, your family betrayed your trust once just the same as mine is now. What made you hang on to hope that things could be made right again?" I was a bit struck, not entirely sure what she was talking about. "My family betrayed my trust, that's true," I said, trying my best to remember a memory I wished to forget. As if in response to my efforts, the entire environment changed, showing my memory in the very sky of the mental landscape we were standing on. My eyes went wide as I experienced my worst memory again for the first time in years. Jacob and I had gotten into trouble again, though I couldn't remember what for. I knew it was bad, though. The memory showed me telling my mother and father, and their horrible reaction to it. My mom told my dad that he would be the one to punish me before leaving in an embarrassed hurry, seeming too upset by what Jacob and I had done to face me right then. Still, whatever it was, I knew deep down in my heart that I didn't deserve the punishment I got for it. I was only 10 years old, and my father grabbed me by the scruff of my neck before marching me out into the woods. There, he pushed me down a deep hole before saying, "Maybe this'll teach you to stay out of trouble for once. And if not, maybe it'll get you the hell out of my hair," he said with disgust in his voice. I tried climbing out of that pit every way I could imagine, but there was a small stream running through it that splashed up onto most of the rocks, making it entirely unscalable. The first day wasn't so bad. I spent most of it calling for help, begging for someone to come and free me from my mossy prison. I called for help until my voice was hoarse, but no one ever came for me that day. The second day I tried calling for help again, but still no one came for me. On the third day I started getting desperate and tried climbing out of the hole anyway, but I slipped on the slick stones and smashed my arm on one of them, breaking it. It was excruciating and I passed out from the pain. On the fourth day, I was in so much pain and so hungry I was getting delirious, unable to make sense of what was happening. I was starting to think I'd actually been left to die in that hole, and panic set in for some time. Even so, it didn't help me get out, and I managed to keep from hurting myself further as I kept looking for any way out. On the fifth day, I was so exhausted and weak that I could barely stay conscious. The pain in my arm made it difficult to sleep, and I was beginning to feel ill. On the sixth day, I couldn't move my fingers on my broken arm anymore. I couldn't force myself to get up. I was dying, and I knew I didn't have long. If someone didn't find me in the next day or two, I was going to die. I couldn't keep my eyes open. My mouth was so dry, and the smooth stones underneath me were cold and uncomfortable. I was sure of it. I was going to die out there. My father had killed me for being an unruly child and embarrassing our family. But then I heard a voice. "Oh my God! Is that?" I immediately recognized it. I still couldn't open my eyes, but I reached up as much as I could and gasped a wheezing breath. I needed his attention. "Dad! Dad, I found him! He's over here! Come quick!" Jacob called out, beckoning his father to come and help me. I couldn't do anything but smile to myself as Demetrius's large, thudding footsteps shook the ground when he ran over. His deep voice boomed orders immediately, sensing the urgency of the situation. "Jacob, tie this rope to yourself. I'll lower you down safely and then you grab him, all right? I'll pull you both up." Jacob didn't hesitate to follow his father's command. The two of them helped me out of the hole and got me to medical attention. And ever since that near-death experience, I've never viewed my family the same. Lin Yu brought me back to the moment by somberly repeating her question. "Your family betrayed you, so why did you carry on?" "You watched the memory, didn't you? It's true that family doesn't mean much to me anymore, but I have friends that matter to me, friends that I know will never give up on me," I explained. Lin Yu turned to face me and looked me right in the eyes, like she was searching for something. She looked in my eyes a few moments before new words came to me, and as I thought of them, the expression on her face began to change.